Thanks for joining us today on Moving Forward. Today's program will be focusing on women in jail and some of the services that this population needs. And we will be talking about Gemma, a local program here in Santa Cruz that offers programs and services for women in jail. We're also going to be spending the second half of the program talking about prostitution and sex trafficking. So thank you for joining us today. In the studio we have Dr. Susan Green. She's one of the founders of Gemma. It's a Santa Cruz-based program that helps women successfully reintegrate and become contributing members to our community. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you so much for inviting me and for taking an interest in these issues on the Gemma program.
Oh, good. Let's start with finding out what is it that made you interested in starting and helping start Gemma?
My first experience was as a volunteer about 20 years ago, working in an alternative women's prison in San Francisco where women could live with their children while they were serving the remainder of their sentence. And one day when I got to the house, there was one of the residents standing on the front porch, and her son was in the arms of a woman I didn't recognize. And I later learned that she had tested dirty for drugs and her son was going to go home with her mother. She was being sent back to prison. Just about the week before, she had told us that when she was growing up, her mother drank a lot, and according to, this woman's name was Shelley, according to Shelley, her mother was more interested in being with her boyfriends than being her mother, and kicked her out of the house. And she went to her grandmother's house, who gave her lunch and sent her back home, and she went back home and her mother said, "I told you, you don't live here anymore." So she was 11 years old and on the streets, and Shelley remembered that as the beginning of her life on the streets, soon working as a prostitute to survive and support herself. And I wondered what would happen to Mateo. I hoped that his grandmother was better able to mother him, but I felt like, given what I knew, could we do something to help prevent children of incarcerated mothers from repeating these same cycles of childhood trauma? Yeah. So I came to graduate school here to learn more about the backgrounds and issues that women in jail and prison face, and with really a focus on trying to prevent their kids from repeating the cycles, and ultimately have learned that helping the mothers is the best way to help the kids, because everybody needs their mother. And they want to be better mothers than they had and be able to give their kids the kind of childhood they believe everyone deserves that they may not have had. And so I ended up working with women in our local jail for the last 15 or so years.
Oh, that's great. Yeah, and the numbers are extraordinary. In the last 25 years, women have been the fastest growing prison population in California and in the whole United States. And so this next news clip we're going to take a look at is about a Central California prison.
It's sad to say, but I became a professional thief, so to speak.
I'm 24 years old and I'm here for robbery with a weapon.
They're mothers who are now identified by a number.
15 to life.
One bad choice changed their lives and their children's lives forever.
Second-degree murder.
You know, I had a lot of dreams and hopes to be something more than a drug addict and a convict when I grew up.
What went wrong?
My mom, when I was born, was in and out of jail.
Like mother, like daughter.
It's my first child. It's a girl, and I'm having her in jail.
Over the past 30 years, the number of women in prison grew by 832%. The male prison population went up only half that in the same period. Nearly 2/3 of women behind bars are mothers. 2 million kids have a parent in prison.
What we're seeing also is 2 generations of people incarcerated.
The common theme behind these walls, drugs and bad men.
I was addicted to cocaine, crack cocaine.
Every time they threw something at him, I got it too.
While these women say they're working toward change, statistics aren't on their side. Nearly 2/3 of criminals wind up right back here. Tiffany Johnson served 16 years of a life sentence for murdering her alleged abuser.
I'm 41 years old. I'm a baby learning how to live in a big world.
She's finding help and an open heart at a program called A New Way of Life.
Take him to child care, drop him off.
Ex-addict and ex-con Susan Burton started the program to stop the cycle.
I was sentenced to prison 6 times.
Instead of going back to people and places that got them into trouble, women on parole live in one of Susan's 5 houses. To stay, they must go to rehab, attend school, and find a job.
We just need a helping hand, and she's out there with both her hands outstretched and welcome you in.
Donations and grants help Susan house and care for 50 women at a time. It costs $1,000 a month for each woman. Susan says it's working. Only 14% of women without resources manage to stay out of trouble after their release. 80% of women who walk through Susan's doors never go back to prison.
I open doors, give them opportunities. I treat them like I want to be treated. I talk to them like I want to be talked to.
From a woman who beat the odds to those still struggling.
Pay attention to those couple of minutes before you do something that in your gut you know is the wrong thing. And if I had done that, maybe I wouldn't be where I am today.
A simple choice between right and wrong that changes so many lives. I'm Melissa Knabb reporting.
It's interesting how they used theft, robbery, murder for the women in this clip. You know, I mean, because aren't they mostly arrested for nonviolent drug-related causes?
They are. I mean, this was prison, which is different than
jails.
jail. But even in prisons, and this is true for men and women, most people are incarcerated for nonviolent drug and drug-related offenses, especially true for women. And the increase that you mentioned, that women is the fastest growing population over the last 25 years, is a direct result of the war on drugs. So it's how we, as a community, as a society, respond to drug addiction for people who don't have enough money either for other resources or to pay bail.
And the number of women who are mothers is huge. I mean, that was something else I just thought, my God, you know, so many of the people who are incarcerated are mothers. Is it 1 out of, where's my?
It's about 2/3, I think.
2/3, yeah.
About 2/3.
So we're really interrupting this whole cycle of
Right.
childcare.
And you saw in this clip that there was a woman who, you know, it's 3 generations. So it's really how do we intervene to break this intergenerational cycle of what I called cycles of pain, because it's really the roots of it are rooted in pain and trauma. And if it's illegal drug use, it's about sometimes self-medicating to heal, to not deal with those feelings with a lack of other kind of resources.
So can you talk about what kind of gap that Gemma is you know, meeting?
Sure.
What is it? You know, if there's a gap in the services, how does it fill it?
So there are some other programs for women in Santa Cruz, and one of the things that really inspired the development of Gemma was I had worked in the jail with women for a number of years, and we'd talk about pre-release plans and talk about programs, and I'd hear someone say, "Oh, that's a great program. I graduated from there 3 times." So I was interested in learning what was good about it and what was missing. And really, the women inside have always been my best teachers, and they were part of the founding members of this program to help develop a program that really met their needs in new ways. And there was a lot of pressure initially to have a program for women and children because there's more funding available if you are helping children. But at the time, there were a couple of programs in Santa Cruz for women and children and their kids, and there was nothing for women without their kids. And so there's a lot of women who either don't have custody, their kids are grown up, don't have kids, or they just want to be able to get their feet on the ground before they have their full-time parenting responsibilities. And they felt like it was really important to have a place for women without kids. So that was one of the differences. And then Gemma the name of Gemma was a name that came from the women in jail, and it's a botanical term that means a bud ready to grow independently. Mm-hmm. And they really resonated with that idea. And so some of the other differences from programs that women had experienced was that it didn't require that you pay until you're making money. So a lot of times people get the first month's rent or first month of a program, but then what happens when you have to pay for the second month and you don't have it? There were individual therapy was a missing piece, that a lot of people had never had any kind of therapy maybe some group therapy, and certainly lots of AA and other support type meetings, which were very helpful. But individual therapy, I mean, everyone's story is different, and they need to understand their own history, their own needs and goals and coping mechanisms. We understood that relapse is part of recovery, so people weren't going to get kicked out for relapse, and that once you're a Gemma participant, the door is always open, so even if you leave or do happen to get kicked out, multiple relapses eventually, some women may have been asked to leave, they can come back when they're ready. So there's this sort of stage of readiness I was always interested in also understanding. And a lot of women I worked with inside seemed really ready to change their lives, but without any resources on the outside to help fulfill those dreams. They would say, well, I get out of here and try to take care of myself, so they go prostitute for some money for a motel, and then they say, you know, but if I'm prostituting and somebody offers me drugs, I'll take them, so I don't have to think about what I'm doing, and then if I'm loaded, I don't want to spend my money in a hotel, I'll sleep under the bridge. And the cycle continues. So this was safe and stable housing was a key piece that was needed. Seeking safety is a cognitive behavioral therapy that addresses addictive behaviors and trauma. So many of these women had experienced childhood trauma, sexual abuse, physical abuse, witnessing domestic violence at rates much higher than the general population, that was often at the roots of their drug use and addiction. And then also just modeling, not knowing any other ways of dealing, that was what they grew up around. So learning new coping skills is a big part of it. A longer residential program, so residential programs are typically 30 to 60 days, and the programming takes place in the house, so all the classes. And Gemma residents can stay there up to 18 months. And we designed it so that they live at the house, but the Gemma office is where they go for therapy, case coordination. So you have to know what time your appointment is and get there just like regular life. I think a lot of women talked about programs where they succeeded, did really well in the program, but then the transition to living, you know, after the program was so different that it was very hard to be successful.
That sounds so great. I mean, it sounds like you're really addressing a lot of the issues that the women need and that they didn't have, you know, originally. Well, can you talk about how you stop this revolving door, though? I mean, I hear what you're saying, and it sounds like because you found these key pieces, that this is really what it makes Gemma so successful.
I think that it's a combination of the program design and the participants. So, of course, a key piece of the design was modeled after a program for women and families in Allentown, Pennsylvania, that I learned about in the course of my graduate work, and remembered if I'm ever involved, I need to remember and talk to this woman, and I did. And they had a day program with all volunteer instructors, which is what the Gemma Day program is modeled after, where women can start when they're in custody. So they take classes like relapse prevention, positive discipline for parenting, resume development, money management, there's physical fitness, nutrition, and then once they're graduates of that program, and again, that's all volunteer instructors, then they're eligible to apply for residency in the Gemma House. So there's some incentive built in, and the Gemma House only has 6 beds, so we knew we wanted to be able to provide services to more women than just 6 at a time. And the day program has been really successful in being able to do that, and then also women who are graduates are eligible for the therapy services and case coordination that I mentioned at the office, which is the other advantage of having it separate from the house.
Really what your program is it's helping women get off the streets, really, and that's what I'd like to spend the second half of the program talking about, are women in prostitution and the problems with sex trafficking in our own communities. Right here in our own county, we're still arresting underage kids for prostitution, and we are yet to kind of get on board with what is going on in a lot of the world to go after those who are doing the harm to the young girls, often underage kids and children, like you said, the 11-year-old who ends up on the street. So I'd like to start talking about that. Women who are trafficked are usually misled in some way, but for a job offer or something. They're poor, hungry, homeless, disenfranchised, illiterate. drug addicted, as you've mentioned, unable to earn a living wage. And many prostitutes are broken in by gang rape, so that they're completely worn down and they're abused by their pimps. U.S. women in prostitution interviewed reported the following, that 47 stated that men expected sex without a condom. 73% reported that men offered to pay more for sex without a condom. And 45% said that they were abused if they insisted on using a condom. So, it's interesting a lot of how people think about that. And so we want to look at that video about Not for Sale. Legal prostitution doesn't protect women from violence, verbal abuse, physical injury, or diseases like HIV. And that this occurs in a lot of illegal prostitution. But it's also brothels. A lot of people think that the legality of a brothel would make it safer. But many times they can't refuse sex with anyone. And many brothels are on lockdown, which means that the women are not allowed to leave. They have their keys taken away from them, so they can't use their car. And we often claim that, oh, they're doing these health checks, But let's think about whose genitals are being checked. The women's genitals are checked on a weekly basis by a doctor. And the men come in by the hundreds and they get a little look-see with a little flashlight, a little wet wipe. That's it. I mean, that's it. So whose health is really being protected? And the panic buttons are also a feature of many legal brothels around the globe. In the Netherlands, they've even taken the pillows out of the brothels, the legal brothels, because they're being used as murder weapons. And by the time the woman hits that panic button that's available for her, she could be dead or severely injured. Women in the legal brothels are under intense emotional stress. Many of them have chronic symptoms of institutionalization. Brothel owners typically pocket half of the monies that the women make. And then the women also have to pay things like tips and finder's fees. They have to tip the cab drivers. They have to pay for their own condoms, their own wet wipes, their own sheets and towels. They often have to rent the room. They have to pay for their own food. And they're fined for everything. They get a fine if they are a little late for a lineup. They can be anywhere from $100 to $500. If she falls asleep on her 14-hour shift, she can get fined. They have a little bell that rings, and they've got 5 minutes to respond to get out and for the lineup. And if she falls asleep, anyway, it's a rough thing. If being sick also is no excuse. They're given pills to stop their menstruation. And one brothel owner admitted in an interview that Melissa Farley did with the brothel owners in Nevada, oh yeah, most have been sexually abused as kids, he said. Some are bipolar and some are schizophrenic. And so the good news is that things are changing and that there is a growing movement that works to address the demand side of prostitution, which is how I think we can really go about changing this. Groups like the Polaris Project, GEMS, CATW, Prostitution Research, they're exposing the need to focus on the buyers and the pimps who traffic the girls and the women. And there's a growing abolitionist movement, as we saw in that video, that there's wanting to re-abolish slavery, that there's a movement that's creating a sea change in how we're looking at women in prostitution. There's innovative legal directions that are taken in countries like Norway, Iceland, Finland, Sweden, where they've adopted laws that target the demand side by leveling felony charges against the men and the pimps and the johns who are trafficking the women. And they've decriminalized it for the women, for the sellers of sex, whether they be transgendered or women, transgender women or men. South Korea has progressive laws. UK's changing their laws around this. A lot of the component piece, I think, that's so important is that equal citizenship for women has to include the right not to be sexually violated and silenced. This is a foreign film that we have, a French film that I think speaks to it perfectly.
Tu ne l'intéresses pas.
Et alors?
Elle n'a aucun désir pour toi.
J'ai ce qu'il faut pour lui plaire.
C'est une femme. Elle mérite le respect.
Non, c'est qu'une pute.
Elle n'accepte pas les rapports sexuels sans préservatif.
C'est ce qu'on verra.
Elle n'a pas forcément le choix de dire non.
Moi, si. Et je me vide les couilles.
Ce n'est pas parce que tu payes que tu n'es plus responsable.
Ton fric te donne pas tous les droits.
Payer pour un rapport sexuel, c'est l'imposer.
C'est parce que tu payes que la prostitution existe.
Payer pour baiser, ça me fait pas bander.
We focus so much on the consenting adult and the choice of this individual. Is that kind of argument is going to go nowhere. I think that we have to frame this issue as a public health emergency and as a human rights issue, which is essentially what I think that it is, and that I hope that we can make that change. And I want to hear from you both about what you think about what I just was talking about, but also more about Gemma and some of the things you wanted to add in.
Well, I think what you've said about if it's criminalized that both those who are paying for sex should be prosecuted as well as those who are providing it, if it's going to be criminalized. I think that, of course, the film clip that we just showed is encouraging, so increasing men's awareness, but also providing opportunities for women. There are, of course, some women who may choose that as a profession, career, lifestyle. But there are a lot of women who do it out of desperation and feeling that they don't have other choices. So I think it needs to start with people when they're young, and it's really about building self-esteem and opportunities for and access to education and healthcare, so people know what their choices are, so that doesn't seem like that's the only way to survive, and that they don't have to be subservient and take the, that they have rights too.
Right.
That
and
it's
so,
really
yeah,
a choice.
So much of that idea of choice often is a very elite few who actually have family and have opportunities. They might have money. They might be able to stop at any time. But so many of the whole industry, of the sex industry, is populated by those who don't have that choice, and that are forced into it through homelessness and disenfranchisement, illiteracy, all those things, and really don't have the opportunity to quit if they just thought, oh well, this has been fun, but I'm done. So
I think providing other opportunities.
Yeah, and it seems like Gemma's programs are really addressing. I mean, say if I'm a street prostitute, or I'm working they use the internet now. I'm an internet prostitute. How can I be helped by Gemma's programs? Could I come in as a former prostitute?
Probably. I think that for a lot of, Gemma's primarily working with women in and out of jail, and for so many of them that I've worked with, they have worked as prostitutes. They don't even see that as their biggest problem, really. I mean, it's so commonplace that it's really rooted in a lack of self-esteem and self-worth. And so building that and understanding that they have other choices and providing opportunities for them to create different goals and a pathway to achieve those One of the other pieces of the Gemma program that is really critical that I think other programs lack only for lack of funding is the aftercare component. So once people either have graduated the day program and are living on their own, or have graduated from the house and have moved out on their own, they still have access to services. And so it's that ongoing support that's really important to keep people successful in their goals, and not feeling like they have to resort to choices that, sometimes we accuse people of bad choices when they choose from an array of bad choices. So,
right, and if we think about the population and what you were describing as having witnessed extraordinary domestic violence, that they themselves have been physically abused, sexually abused, all these are components that are huge marks against us, and that all of us can learn a lot from trying to create services and to try to provide help for people like that. And I'm really so grateful that you've been able to come here today and to talk about this, because I think that this is something that I hope as a community we can start to really focus our energy on, how to create a world where we all matter, where everybody's health and economic survival is of essential meaning to all of us. So is there any final things you'd like to say? We're getting close to time.
Well, I think that what the Gemma women have shown is that people can change, and that if we provide opportunities for change, it's a lot less expensive than incarceration. And most of them have been incarcerated, I think, an average of 4 times. So if we, already Gemma is showing that we're reducing the rate at which they return. And I think if we invest as a community and see that people can change, we can reduce the generations that follow their footsteps, and we can better invest our public dollars in ways that keep our community safer rather than locking people up for drug addiction.
Right. Well, thank you so much, Susan Green, for joining us today. And thanks for watching Moving Forward. And stay tuned, there'll be more programs coming up. Thanks for watching.
Nightmare, I'm an 18-year-old girl, walking with my head down cause I don't need no trouble, but shit just seems to bubble right underneath my feet, so I pulled out my book, I sleep with underneath my pillow, cause I'm kinda little, so I gotta stay prepared, so I just started swinging